Hello everyone and welcome to Programming in Access 2013, the Advanced course. My name is Steve Bishop, and in this video we're going to be talking about using the file system object. Now the file system object is a very handy library that allows us to manipulate files and folders on the hard drives of our computers, as well as a few other things. So I'm not going to show you every function that's available on the file system object. I'm just going to show you a few of the more useful functions that we get with the file system object. And I'm going to go ahead and use the demonstration that we've created in the last couple of videos that has the form for the email where we're sending an attachment to the email. So let's go ahead and hop out here. And we've got our form here that the user can go ahead and put in a subject line and add an attachment with a body and then click on send. And when the user clicks on the browse button, they are prompted with a file folder with a find file dialog box that allows them to go out and pick a file, and then that file gets displayed here in the attachment text box here. Then when the user clicks on the send button, they're going to have a small little check to make sure that the user has in fact put some sort of text in that TXT attachments text box, and if so, then it goes ahead and tries to attach that document that's been selected to the attachments collection on the email. Now there is one small problem with this. If the user goes and types in something here in the attachment, anything at all, well, that's clearly not a valid file. So when this method here, when this attachments add tries to go, it's going to pass the validation here because it's checking. This is only checking to make sure that there's some sort of text in that text box. But when it goes to actually add the file, it's going to get an incorrect value and you will get an error. So what we probably want to do is check to make sure that that file that the user selected and put here in this attachments text box is in fact a valid file that still exists on the hard drive. So we're going to go ahead and do that. To start with, we're going to go ahead and click on the tools up here at the top and then go to references. And under references, if you scroll down once again down to the Microsoft section, we're looking for the reference called Microsoft Scripting Runtime. And I'm going to go ahead and select it. Now you can see that the library exists in the System32 directory of our Windows folder, and that's the scrrun.dll library. Now this library has existed, I believe, since around Windows 2000 and still exists in Windows 10. So by doing this early binding, chances are pretty good that that scrrun.dll file will exist on all of the Windows operating systems that your users will be running Access underneath, as well as future versions of Windows. Chances are pretty good that that scrrun.dll file will exist. So doing early binding is perfectly fine. We're not really going to run into much of a chance of people having Access breakdown because this dynamic library doesn't exist. However, if you are absolutely obsessed with doing late binding, I will show you the syntax to do that. Okay, so in the meantime, just so that we have IntelliSense, I'm going to go ahead and do early binding, and we need to go ahead and instantiate an object of that file system object. So we're going to go ahead and dim ourselves an object, and the name of the object is going to be FSO, which is fairly standard for the file system object. You'll see FSO is a very common name given to the file system object library object. Then I'm going to go ahead and do as new, because I can use the new keyword to go ahead and instantiate my object, and it's going to be file system object. So dim FSO as new file system object. Okay, so now we've dimmed our new file system object. Let me just show you guys, for those of you who really preferred the late binding, you could certainly do set FSO equal to, and then here you would just do, just like you did with the Outlook.application create object method, we're going to do create object, and then in here for our class as a string, the string that you need to pass it is Scripting.FileSystemObject, and that will instantiate a file system object and assign it to the FSO variable. And of course up here you would just need to change this to, instead of a new file system object, it would just be object, okay? And that's perfectly fine, that's perfectly valid. But once again, I want to get the IntelliSense so that I can show in this demonstration what some of the options are. So once again, new file system object, and let me go ahead and clear out this set method here, or set function, set command, excuse me. Okay, so now that we've got our file system object created and instantiated, let's go ahead and use it. And where we want to use it is we want to replace this kind of inadequate check, this validation of the file where it's located. We want to go ahead and replace this with a new validation. And that validation is going to be using the file system object to go out and actually make sure that the file exists. And the way you do that is we're going to go ahead and start off with an if statement. We're going to see if FSO, and you can see the IntelliSense for FSO brings up quite a few different functions. We've got copy file, copy folder, delete file, drive exists, file exists, folder exists, get drive, get file version, get folder. Lots and lots of functions that are available to us that relate to managing the files and folders on your system. The method that we're looking for is file exists, okay? And the file exists method returns a Boolean value. So it's going to return a true or false based upon whether or not the string that we pass in as a parameter leads to a file that truly does exist on the hard drive. So the file that we need to pass in as a string is going to be me.txt attachment. And here, just like we had with the to subject line and body, the text boxes themselves are objects. So if we want to ensure that rather than an object getting passed into it and being assigned, we want to get specifically the string value from out of that text box, then we need to pass in we need to get the dot value. And again, the reason why you want to do that is because the text box, if it's left empty and there's no string inside of that text box, it will return a null value, and you cannot pass a null value into this file exists method. It will actually give you a runtime error. So you need to make sure you're passing in a string. And using the dot value, if the user does not put anything in the text box, the dot value ensures that at the very least a blank string will be passed in, which is a perfectly fine valid parameter to pass into the file exists function. If you do a blank string as the parameter passed into the file exists folder function, it's just going to return back false because there is no such file as a blank, right? There's no blank file. So now that we've got our file exists and we know it's going to come back with a true or false, we can go ahead and do then. And let me go ahead and end our if statement. So if the file does in fact exist, then let's go ahead and attach it to our email. So I'm just going to copy this statement here. And there we go. So if the file does in fact exist that the user has selected and has in that text box for the TXT attachments, then go ahead and add it to our attachments collection. So that's perfectly valid right there. That would satisfy the requirements of this sending of an email. But I kind of want to take it one step further to demonstrate some of the functionality of the file system object. So let's say rather than just attaching the document to our email, I want to go ahead and create a subfolder underneath the directory where our Northwind database is running. So I've got my Northwind database running on this under my C drive, right? And I want to actually have the files that I attach to my emails get copied to a subfolder that will reside somewhere underneath my Northwind folder. So the way you do that is we need to, first and foremost, I think we need to do it within this if statement, because if the file doesn't already exist, there's no point in trying to copy it to that subfolder. So inside of our if statement, we're going to do another if statement. And that's going to be if, and we're going to check first to make sure that that folder exists inside of our, that subfolder exists. So in order to do that, we need to do an FSO folder exists. And once again, we need to pass in the folder that we want it to be. Now, just to simplify matters, I'm going to actually add a new string variable here. So we're going to call this dim, and I'm going to call this folder path as a string. Okay, so that's perfectly fine. We got the folder path as string, and the folder path is going to be equal to our current project path, and then concatenate at the end of this our attachments subdirectory. Okay, so our path, our folder path that we want to start dropping those files into is now a string of current project.path and attachments, because we're going to be using this frequently throughout the rest of this code. So let's go ahead and save that as a variable called folder path. So now we can check to see if folder path exists. Okay, and if folder path does exist, then let's go ahead and copy the file. Well, wait a minute. Does that mean that if this folder doesn't, the subfolder attachments doesn't exist, then we're not going to copy the file? Well, yeah, that's probably not quite what we want. What we probably really want is that if the folder doesn't exist, then let's create it. So if the folder does not exist, so we're going to use the not keyword here. If the folder does not exist, then let's go ahead and create it. So FSO folder, create folder, there we go. And now we can just, once again, pass in the folder path. Okay, that's why we did that, right? So we don't have to type this whole thing out again, right? This current projects.path, don't have to type that out. We can just use the folder path variable. Okay, so if the folder does not exist, then let's go ahead and create it. And now that we know that it's created, we can just go ahead and move on to issue our copy statement. So let's go ahead and FSO copy file. Now the copy file method requires a few parameters. The source as a string, which would be the full path to where the file currently resides, to a destination, and then overwrite the file as true or false. Do we want to go ahead and overwrite the file if it already exists? And I think we're going to go ahead and do that. So first we need to pass in the source. That would be me.txt attachment.value. We need to pass in the destination, which would be, again, that folder path. And then true or false. Well, it's going to be true. I'm going to go ahead and say yes. And true is the default, by the way. So if you left that parameter off, you'd be perfectly fine. It'll still go ahead and overwrite it. Okay, so now that we're going to copy that file to the new subfolder called attachments, then let's go ahead and attach it to our attachments collection. So now we want to go ahead and add the folder path. Now, there's a bit of a problem here because what do we add at the end of our attachments, right? Because if we go ahead and concatenate and we're trying to add the file, okay, because we've got the file copied into our attachments subfolder. Oops. So our attachments subfolder now contains that file. So if we're going to copy, if we're going to attach the copy of the file that exists under the attachments folder, well, how do we get the file name here from the attachments folder, right? How do we get the actual file? Because if we just did me.txt attachment value, well, that's going to give us the full path and file name. So it would be folder path with a backslash and then C:\\/ and then the full path to the file name. That's not what we're looking for. We want to get just the file name and put it here. So if we could, we'd just say have just the file name, right? So how do we get this file name? Well, let's go ahead and create a variable that's going to contain the file name. So dim file name as string. And one of the functions that's on the file system object can help us take this me.txt attachment value and just to get the file name from it. We could obviously do some string manipulation here, right? We could do some file name equals the right of this string, and the length is like the what would be the in string reverse, in str reverse, and we could check the string for where the backslash is, right? So we could check me.txt. So you see this is pretty complicated, right? To do all of this, to try and find just the file name using some right and in strings and all sorts of stuff. So luckily for us, that file system object really makes things simple. It just is get file name is the name of the method, and we just need to pass in the full path to that file. So me.txt attachment.value, and that's just going to return for us a string of just the file name, and then it's going to put it into that file name variable, and now we can go ahead and attach it and concatenate it to our attachments.add. Okay, let's go ahead and save this and debug this because everything I think looks good. Let's just go over this one last time. So we've got tools, references, got our scripting runtime library is a reference here for our early binding. And then down here, well, first we've, of course, instantiate. We create and instantiate our file system object. Now we're doing a check to make sure that the file that's been selected exists. We're also creating a string that's going to be our new folder, right? Our new path to our folder. If the folder does not exist yet, then go ahead and create that folder using the create folder method. And then go ahead and copy the file, passing in the original location and the new location, and then overwrite that if the file doesn't already exist. Then for the file name, we wanted to get just the file name, and rather than doing a bunch of string manipulation, we utilized the get file name function, the get file name method that's on the file system object, and we passed in the full path to our file. And then once we've got that, now we have everything we need to go ahead and attach using the new folder location where our file exists, and just concatenate all of this together as the new location for our file that we want to add to our attachments collection of our email, and we should be just fine. Let me go ahead and set a breakpoint here on the send click event. Save this, and yep, everything's already been debugged, so we look good, right? Okay, let's go ahead and create our new email. So let's do, all right, in the subject would be, I don't know, heavens to Betsy. Oops. Another test email. Yay, another test email. Okay, let's go ahead and select an attachment. Let me go ahead and pick the beautiful.pdf and click OK. And let's go ahead and click on the send button, and that's going to take us to our breakpoint. All right, so for our breakpoint, let's move on. So we went ahead and instantiate our file system object as well as all the other things. Create our Outlook application. You can see there's our icon here for our Outlook. Create an email item inside of that Outlook. Set our to subject line and body. All right. So first, check to make sure that the file exists. We'll just go down here to our immediate window and check that. Sure enough, it's true, so we should move on to the next step. And all right, we're setting our folder path. So folder path now, let's take a look at what folder path contains. You can see it's our C/Northwind/attachments. So that attachments folder would be here under C Northwind and then attachments. Does the folder currently exist? Let's check that. No, it does not. And since we have the not keyword here, that means it's going to go ahead and step in here and create our folder for us. So let's see if it creates it for us. Sure enough, there's our attachments folder. Perfect. Okay, so the next thing, let's go ahead and copy the file. So again, we're passing in the current location of the file, where we want to send it to, and then whether or not we want to go ahead and overwrite that file if it already exists. Permission denied. Permission denied. This is one of those things that trips up people all the time. I can't tell you how many times I get tripped up by this permission denied. I've checked the folder for both the location that the file comes from and where it's going to. You can see it's perfectly fine. The security is good here. I'm an administrator on this computer, so I have full permission to copy that file. So why would I be getting a permission denied? Well, that's really not an accurate statement. It's really not permission denied. And they could probably give this a better error, because the problem is not with permissions. The problem is that the folder path that we're sending it to, this copy file method is very, very particular about the path you send the file to. It requires that there is a backslash, a trailing backslash at the end of your folder path. So we need to actually concatenate and add a trailing backslash to the folder path. So now, instead of having something that looks like this, instead we have something that looks like that. So we have this trailing backslash to our folder path that we're sending the files to. And now you can see it passes just fine. Went ahead and copied the file. Let's go ahead and open up the attachments directory. There's the PDF file of my wife's beautiful song. And now we set the file name equal to just the file name portion of the original file. You can see it's called beautiful.pdf. And we can go ahead and use that here for our folder path backslash file name. And that is the full path now to the file that we want to go ahead and attach to our attachments. Let's go ahead and select yes. And now we do our typical check to make sure that the mail gets sent. Sure does. All right, there we go. Once again, let me go ahead and open up Outlook to make sure. Oops, boy, keyboard's running a little rough here. Outlook, there we go. Let's check and see if that email has been received. And processing, sorry for the delay, inbox, synchronizing. Somebody wants me to add them to their LinkedIn. There's our heavens to Betsy. All right, there we go. Okay, so there's our another test email with the beautiful PDF added. So there you go, folks. That is how you can use the file system object. Obviously, there are more functions on the file system object that you can utilize. One of the great ones here, I'm not going to go over this right now, but the file system object does have the create text file, and you can use the create text file as well as the open text file to actually do logging as text. So if you want to log all of your users' actions or any sort of errors or something, and you want to log those to a text file that you can open, that's you can use the file system object to go ahead and create that text file, and then using the file stream in order to actually write lines to it. And maybe I'll demonstrate that in a later video. But for now, that's how you use the file system object. Please don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. And thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video.